Hey all, long time no see. Just a bit of an update for those who are not in the loop or didn't see my community post. After I uploaded my last video, my computer died on me. Spectacularly, in fact. It took nearly 6 months, but I'm back and ready to simultaneously suffer at the hands of the snail and make more content that I was not expecting anybody to like at all, considering that the last video was about War Thunder Sim of all things, but needless to say, I was pleasantly surprised. Now, on to the rest of the video. So, after my last video where I brought up concerns such as matchmaking, player counts, and the learning curve, many of you brought up comments in my comments section. Many I agree with, some I don't, but I would like to address some of those in this video. Before I get started, if I didn't directly respond to you, don't worry, I did read every comment. It was either a duplicate comment or something that was already covered. I also want to say if I don't agree, it doesn't mean you're necessarily completely wrong, it's just that I disagree. Alrighty, to kick things off, we'll start with Dirty Dog 4's comment. Dirty Dog 4 says, "You're spot on, mate. I have noticed a couple other specific issues as well. People also perceive a bias on one side or the other based on the restricted vehicle selections. This causes a lack of interest in playing for one side or the other. Most commonly, Soviet 7.0 to about 9.3 is normally very few players. Everyone else has better reload, mobility, and probably a stabilizer. I get these vehicle sets are designed closer to historical accuracy, but when there's a perceived armor or stabilizer bias on one side, it feels bad. I do love Sim, but unfortunately the group I normally play with have basically made no progress on the Soviet tree, even though I have, so we can't balance out the queues. This probably also indicates a regional bias to nation progression, hampering the ability to fill out teams." Well, thank you for leaving a comment, Dirty Dog 4. I will say, when it comes to the vehicle selections, I'm in the same boat. I understand they're there for balance reasons. However, the balance reasons are at the cost of the game mode is as a whole, if that makes sense. And I think we're on the same page here. I think that the gameplay could probably be improved. I mean, honestly, there are some vehicles that probably could be slotted in there that maybe should be but aren't. But who knows? I'm just suggesting. And I completely get the final sentiment. I don't have anybody to play Sim with. I play Sim entirely by myself. And it can be a little bit annoying, especially when, the matchmaker looks for a certain number of players to get a match going, but there's not enough players on an opposing side to be able to do that. So, as far as solutions for that, we just have to try to boost our overall player numbers in Sim, which I made some suggestions on how to do that in the last video. Thanks again, Dirty Dog 4, for your comment. Moving on to the next comment, Jack Tanner 4948 says, "Unpopular but true opinions. 1. SimGround needs some form of map markers for friendlies with its low player count and no idea where your team has gone. It often feels like a single player experience. Yes, I know there's the follow me function, but maybe, just maybe, we need something a little bit less ad hoc. Maybe a periodically updating map to represent radiomen sharing information. The only argument I ever hear is realism, which is weak considering we have kill hit cams, etc." I'm going to tackle these one at a time since they are numbered. But as for number 1, I completely agree. I think that maybe periodically every 45 seconds, minute, whatever, we should be able to get some sort of update on where our team is at. It wouldn't be entirely unrealistic because, as you said, radio operators share information all the time in combat, especially on whereabouts and where other units may be. And moving on to the second part, number 2, captured east-west vehicles in the same tree has no place in Sim, end of. I disagree. There are NATO countries that still field Soviet-era vehicles. It is what it is. It makes it hard to identify friend from foe sometimes, But if we had a system like was suggested on your first point, it wouldn't necessarily be as much of an issue. As for your third point, spawn points, again, no good reason why a lower BR rated vehicle in the lineup should cost the same as a higher rated vehicle to take in. Honestly, as a whole, I wish Gaijin would use SP cost more as a soft balance for vehicles across RB and SB, particularly for Cold War IFVs that can incongruously get shoved into World War II matchmaking because of their relative capabilities. I'm split on this one. The spawn point system works well because it scales, at least it does in realistic. Or in Sim, everything has a set price. In Sim, you only get 3 spawns, kind of like arcade. Realistic, you can spawn as many times as you can. Or as many times as you have vehicles or backups to do so. World War II matchmaking with Cold War IFVs is something that is going to be hard to balance because of Cold War IFVs' capabilities. I mean, many of them do have missiles, and you're fighting against vehicles that would have never seen missiles of those types in combat. However, they do have to fit in somewhere, and we can't just necessarily just discount them entirely. So, as for that one, I mean, that's kind of a two-parter. The Cold War IFVs, they kind of have to stay where they're at. I don't really know how else we could fix that. The spawn points, I also agree with you. Kind of like realistic, I wish they had a system where lower BR vehicles were cheaper than higher BR vehicles, especially depending on your average match BR, but who knows. And then moving on to your fourth point, air issues with helis goes without saying. That is a fair point. Helicopters, especially near the top BRs, can be quite the pain to deal with, especially considering the fact that in Sim, you can spawn in early with some insane weaponry. Can't necessarily do that in other modes like realistic. How we fix that, I don't know. Especially considering the fact that helicopters in a lot of ways can be less effective than standard jet or propeller aircraft, depending on the use case. Thank you for the comment, JackTanner4948, and I hope to see you in my comment section again, and move on to the next one. IR George H says, the biggest problem are the maps that get selected as you often get small maps. Sorry about that. Main problem for tier stuff like Abrams, Leopards, etc. that it takes no time to get into spawns and people just camp. Also bullet pointed, and like this, another comment, I'm going to be doing this one at a time, and I just want to get started with that first sentence. Yes, small maps are a big problem, especially at higher tier. We should have larger maps. There are maps that have been in the game for 2 years now that still are not in sim rotation. They definitely should be. However, that is on Gaijin to add them properly. And now going on to your first point here, games need to be more balanced, more to do with battle ratings, as when you get teams that have M48, etc., and Cold War stuff, to then randomly having one light tank HSTVL to just mop up the enemies in T55 or T72A, or another example of PT7657 against Tiger 2s, the balance is way off. Balance the vehicles by battle rating, not by a random selection of tanks thrown in there. Maybe have at most a BR of 3 difference as you would want to bring SPAA. And I think that is a fair point. I think certain vehicles should not be in with others, especially if they are a major down tier. Particularly the PT7657 against the Tiger 2 can be quite devastating. However, it is lightly armored, and so it kind of is a little bit understandable. However, I would like to see a little bit better balance of the vehicle selection. As for the second point, the players that lack the lineups, they pick the worst bunch of vehicles that you will have. Example, a T-72A, but many people only have T-55A or even T-54. So again, you just get wiped with balance. There is no easy fix because it is down to the players. But I guess the spawn points for T-72A should be a lot more, or maybe the T-55A could be free if it's at the bottom pile of BR in the game. That could be a little rough. As you said in your comment, George, the problem with lineups is that they're entirely player-based. I mean, Gaijin kind of controls it a little bit based on the selections of vehicles that they let us use. However, the actual usage is entirely up to us as players. I think the biggest thing would be to push people to have a full lineup before they try going for sim, but that's not something we can force on anybody. That's something that we have to just suggest, especially to new players that want to get into it. And as for your third point, SPAA, nobody plays it or even grinds for it. Stop people progressing without SPAA and make SPAA earn a lot more to give people incentives to play. I think this is... I kind of agree, but I don't agree. I don't think you should have to research SPAA. However, I do agree in making SPAA earn more. That way there's more of an incentive to play SPAA, because SPAA is an important part of any good ground force, real life or in game. And as for your fourth point, the same game modes over and over. Make more bigger maps, which you can progress onwards, having capture points A, B, C, D, E, F, etc., that you attack or defend in territory gained or lost. That's a great idea. However, the size of the maps would have to be large, very large, especially at top tier. And Gaijin already has a habit of making incredibly large maps and then sticking low tier players into them, which is stupid, frankly. I would love to have a system like this. I used to love playing Battlefield 1 back in the day, where you would just go and push objectives one at a time, and the key was to capture the objective at the end. I think that would be a great idea if it could be implemented into War Thunder, but that is something that the devs would have to look into on their own. And the last line here, there needs to be a ground-only mode, as pilots have air SB, so ground should have their own, not ground and air mixed. And while I understand that sentiment, it is ground sim, and part of being a sim is that there's going to be planes. That's just the way it is. Close air support is a part of tank combat. It has been since World War I, and probably for the foreseeable future. In game, I guess they could make a mode where it's just tanks, but then I wouldn't be one to call it a sim then. That's just my opinion. To each their own. Thanks again, IR George H, for your comment, and move on to our next one. Hero the Avenger 60 says, my biggest problem in Sim is the prevalence of Lend-Lease vehicles. These vehicles are functionally identical to one another, but on opposing teams. Towards the end of my time playing Sim, I'd say 75% of my deaths were directly caused by this issue, either getting TK'd myself, mistaking an enemy for friendly, or getting booted for TKing. They need to either remove these vehicles from the lineup or put them on the side they properly aligned with. Captured vehicles aren't so bad because they have a different paint scheme that makes them easy to identify. They're all premium, so much rarer than the Tech Tree Lend-Lease vehicles. Secondly, was size of player base. You know what? I'll cover the first point first. The Lend-Lease vehicles can be annoying, and however, again, it's a game where we do have Lend-Lease vehicles. Now, I do believe Lend-Lease vehicles should be clearly marked. However, that is on the player base to do, or Gaijin could, in theory, make sure they're clearly marked before they are allowed to be in a match. It wouldn't be the first time, especially with BMPs and East German decals. But that's not something I can control, but I do think Gaijin should be looking into it. Now, as for your second point, Actually, I do want to bring up one other point. I was playing a captured vehicle while getting the footage for this video, and or not even a captured vehicle, a tech tree, a tech tree premium, the Panzer SFL 1C, and I kept getting team killed by friendlies while playing because nobody was able to identify the tank and just kept killing me on accident, which was ironic considering, some of them were like NBFZs. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. Okay, moving on to the second point. Secondly, was size of player base versus map size. It was common to have games with only 5 people per side. Then you stick everyone on a map 5 kilometers by 5 kilometers or whatever. I genuinely had multiple games where no one died. Both teams drove past each other without contact. Then one team capped the enemy objective before the enemy had time to turn around and counter it. I like the larger maps, but they need large teams to facilitate them. Other than rejuvenating the mode as a whole, this isn't really directly solvable, though. I think they could also improve the spawn system. RB spawn points work well enough. They could just use that. I agree and disagree on some things here. I agree that the large maps for small teams is a really bad situation. There was a lot of times I had large maps such as, like Red Desert, and there was nobody around. I didn't see anybody for the whole match. It's because there's only 5 or 6 people in the match. The only thing we can really do about that is either have small games be on small maps, which is detrimental for some vehicles that need a longer range to be effective, or we need to get more players in, which is one of the biggest things we should be working on as a sim community, is we need to make it more approachable so that more people can play the game. I agree with the spawn points. I think that the RB spawn system is better. The problem with sim is you only get 3 spawns, and especially when you have low player numbers like we have right now, that makes it so that people die pretty quick, and then there's just nobody in the match anymore, which is bad, obviously, for a lot of reasons. The only thing we can really do about it is push for change and hope that they make the changes that we want to see. Thank you, Kira the Avenger 60, for your comment. I hope to see you in the comments in the future. Let's move on to the next one. John Roscoe 2406 says, it used to be, a long time ago, Ground Sim did not have designated rotating vehicle BR brackets like one high and one low. You used to be able to queue in no differently than you do in, for example, RB. They never should have changed that. They have their reasons, I am sure, and I suspect some of those reasons, but suffice to say, from a player standpoint, it was positively stupid. I'd play Ground Sim 100% if I could. In case anyone thinks I am fibbing, they made this change years ago. I'd say at least 5 or so it could very well be from before some of you were playing. I've been playing since early 2014 from the update 1 or 2 patches before the full release of Ground. I hear you. I've been playing a little bit longer than that. I started playing, it was just air. There was no ground yet. I've been playing this game for a long time. I have the, I believe it is Wings of Steel, with the predecessor to War Thunder on the 360, and that was an interesting game to say the least. At one point there was no brackets, it was just queue in, and that was probably one of the best times in sim history. It was probably the most alive I've ever seen it at any BR, because you could play whatever you wanted to. We don't have that anymore. All we have is the rotating system, which I believe is incredibly flawed. Not only is it flawed, I also believe it is incredibly detrimental, because people don't get to play what they want to play. I addressed this in my first video as well. And because of that, they either just don't play sim or they wait for those specific brackets. And it could be a long time until those brackets come around and you see actual activity. So, John Roscoe 2406, I'm 100% behind you as a veteran of the game myself. These people that think you may be lying are wrong. There used to be a way you could just queue like any other game mode. I wish they would bring it back. Thanks for your comment. I hope to see you in the comments in the future. And we'll move on to our next one. Blackbird Draws says, as an exclusive Sim Air Battle player, I mostly felt how much Gaijin hates Sim modes when they added the MiG-21 Bison as an Indian plane to the British tech tree. The visual IFF in Sim mode went straight to hell for that BR, and all the premium captured vehicles that gives planes to the other side that they shouldn't have is just stupid. There is just too many kids playing arcade and so-called realistic modes that Gaijin simply no longer cares about the few dudes that play sim modes. You can see that on maps added, the nice new maps added in recent 1 to 2 years are still not available in sim modes at all, which I brought up in an earlier comment, because Gaijin cannot spend a developer time just putting enduring confrontation markers on them yet. Well, thank you for the comment. The captured vehicles for aircraft I can't necessarily speak to, but I do agree they are getting a little bit out of hand. It seems like everybody has everybody's vehicles these days, and that's just the way it is. I can definitely understand where you as an air sim player are coming from. I don't play much air sim. I can't fly to save my life. I prefer to do my flying in DCS, actually. But I definitely see your point, and I do believe that they should at least put in for aircraft some type of IFF that doesn't require you to just visually identify, if that makes sense. Thanks for the comment, Blackbird Drost. I hope to see you in my comments in the future. We'll move on to the next one. This one's also on the longer side, so I'm going to hit one issue at a time. Runa Kovacs 4759 says, Air Sim issues cost. You spend 10 to 15,000 to spawn your plane, and in 15 minutes your earnings are capped at 18 to 23,000. Ergo, profit of around 5,000 SL or so, maybe 8,000, while your spawn cost is uncapped, and your rewards scale with time alive with a 20% penalty if you did not survive the 15 minutes and land afterwards. This makes it practically impossible for me to play my Korean jets, as fighting a competent enemy means we trade evenly or I'm losing more often than winning. However, I should not be punished for that, otherwise how am I supposed to learn? Air Sim is affordable up to like BR53 rank 3 and becomes stupid over rank 4. I haven't yet flown Vietnam or later aircraft in Sim, but I think the earning potential gets better at higher tier. Coincidentally, I want to fly Korean stuff in props, not Missile Thunder. Well, for your first point, you're entirely right. The costs for Air Sim are outrageous, as are the costs for a couple other game modes I can think of. 10 to 15,000 just to spawn, and then with no cap is just, it's stupid, because you're looking at it from a profit perspective, because you're there to make RP and money. But how are you going to make RP and money if all the money you're making is being spent on spawns? That logically ends in the conclusion of, well, then you just can't spawn, which is not what we want at all. So I definitely think they should drop the spawn cost, maybe put on a cap for spawn costs for Air Sim. I will say I have played a little bit of the Vietnam stuff with a buddy of mine. I tend to avoid Air Sim, but I have played a little bit of F4s and MiG-23s with him, and he is he's one of those people that enjoys it, and I will say I didn't find it too bad, but spawn cost was definitely an issue. For your second issue, PvE lobbies during events and Grief and Collusion. That is something that has been a thing in War Thunder for a very long time. I don't know if maybe you were around at the time, but back a couple years ago, you used to be able to spawn into an air lobby with a bomber and pretty much make infinite money. That was something they went and they kind of destroyed bombers over, which makes sense. That's kind of stupid. You shouldn't be able to do that. I don't know how they fix that in the long term, but that is something that they have to do from a developer's perspective. Your Third issue, captured planes in China. I hate fighting armies of P-47s, P-38s, and B-25s as America. My ability to go to IFF goes out the window. I hear that as well. As the previous comment, I believe, actually said, IFF with captured vehicles can be quite the pain. However, they are here. They're probably here to stay. I don't know what we can do about that. I believe, as I said before, they should be clearly marked, but in air, I know that can get a little rough. Thanks for the comment, Runa Kovacs 4759. I hope to see you in my comments in the future. We'll move on to our next comment. Our next comment comes from Fiasco3. I was one of the very first sim tank players, but left it after they moved away from the Allies versus Axis versus Allies old mode. Also, the number of copy-paste tanks made it nearly unplayable, making determining friend or foe nearly impossible. Okay, I'm going to stop there because it seems like you keep going. The Axis versus Allies mode, I mean, they mostly still have that at lower BRs. Up at higher BRs, you have what is more along the lines of the Cold War, where you have more of the COM bloc countries versus NATO countries. However, I will acknowledge it's not the same as the old Axis versus Allies. The copy-paste tanks, I get. A lot of people have that issue. As I said before, I believe they should be marked very clearly. I think that should be a rule, but that's on us as a community to push for. It was a lot easier back then because there were only 3 nations with clearly identifiable tanks. That is something that is both a blessing and a curse, because having the variety of all these different nations now lets us play whatever we might want to play between, I don't even know how many countries there are anymore. I don't know off the top of my head, but we have quite a few, and I'm glad for that selection. Shrinking small cluttered maps is another problem. I also agree with that. It seems like the maps are getting smaller. The larger maps that used to be around, they are blocking off parts of the maps, which is probably one of the dumbest things they could do, especially as you get closer to high tier. There was no CAS. I guess that's kind of fair. However, CAS is an important part of ground combat, as I've stated previously. Also, the adding of Battlefield Fog and Haze wrecked the beautiful graphics and long-range shooting duels. People knew the risk of roaming the battlefield in captured tanks. I think people who play captured tanks still do. And as for the Battlefield Fog and Haze, the Haze is, and I believe the Fog, I'm not entirely sure, is actually a toggleable option. You can turn those off. The long-range shooting duels, I still have plenty of them. It's just something that you gotta go out and use the proper vehicles to be able to do that kind of thing with. Fiasco 3, I would like to thank you for your comment, and hope to see you in my comment section in the future. And we will move on to our next comment. Sekuram says, Enduring Confrontation needs a ground battle mode. The maps are big enough. I 100% agree. There's not a whole lot to say about this one. I do believe we need a ground battle during confrontation. That is something I've been pushing for many years in different War Thunder communities, and I would love to see it. However, I don't know it'll ever happen, unfortunately. Sekuram, I'd like to thank you for your comment. I'd like to see you in my comment section again, and we will move on to our next comment. Drefsab says, I like the idea of sim battles, especially having to use the proper weapon sights instead of the one that exists in Ground RB, where your sight is at the end of your barrel. But I think what really kills it is leaving the hit camera in. When you can just spray your MG through a bush and see exactly where the enemy is and where he's looking, it makes the mode feel so much less immersive and fun. We'll address that before we get to the second part of the comment. I understand the sentiment. I agree we could probably do without the hit camera. I could see the developers also saying that the hit camera is a core part of the game and they don't want to take it out. And I think as much as we would like to say it, or as much as we would like to see it removed as sim players, I don't think we will ever see that happen. Moving on to the second part of your comment, that and all the Lend-Lease captured vehicles. Quick, which nation Sherman is at a glance? Better flip that coin and pull the trigger. I agree with this. Lend-Lease and captured vehicles can be a bit of a pain. I've addressed it a couple times in this video already. Especially Shermans. Every country's got a Sherman. So I believe, as I said before, they should be clearly marked. I think as a sim player, you should at least know their basic camo pattern. The one that they come with, not one of the ones that's unlocked or bought. I think it's better to err on the side of caution most of the time, but sometimes you can't. Sometimes they come in shooting and you gotta shoot back. So, unfortunately, you gotta flip the coin, like you said, and pull the trigger. Jeff Sab, I'd like to thank you for leaving a comment, and hope to see you in the comment section in the future. And we'll move on to our next comment. And for our last comment today, Mortal BP says, simulator game mode is hardly a simulator. The MGs are still unmanned. There's still a hit camera telling you exactly what you damaged or how many crew you killed. It just feels like a much worse realistic battle experience rather than a separate simulator game mode. I understand this sentiment. Some of the MGs are still unmanned. Some are manned, especially on specifically the Hellcat. The commander mans the MG. There is still a hit camera telling you exactly what you damaged or how many crew you killed. That is true. That is something I've also addressed earlier in this video. It's not really something that I think Gaijin is willing to tweak, though, because I do believe they consider it part of the core War Thunder experience. I understand where your logic of a worse realistic battle experience. I would, however, disagree on that. I think it is slightly better because you do get that first-person type feel. However, I understand where you're coming from on this one. I really don't have much more to say on this topic. And that will wrap it up for our comments today. Thank you, Immortal BP, for the comment. I hope to see you in my comment section in the future. And we'll wrap this video up. I really hope you enjoyed the video of me reading your guys' comments from the last video. I do plan on uploading more, not just sim, but also probably some realistic content as well. For those who want a little more of me, for some reason, I don't know how you could deal with this ugly voice. I am starting a podcast with a couple of friends of mine called The Vanguard. I'll leave the link in the description below. We don't have any episodes up yet. They will be being, I believe the first episode is scheduled for within the next month or so. It's a history podcast. We talk a lot about military history, the type of tactics used. We got some sketches planned for the future. It should be a lot of fun. Link will be in the description. Go check it out. Subscribe so that you make sure you see our first couple of episodes. We plan on having some guests on in the future. Might talk about some other things like some reenacting type things, because me and my co-host are Civil War reenactors. Might have some guests on from that scene. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Feel free to subscribe, leave a like if you did. If you don't, feel free to thumbs down. Let me know what you didn't like, and I will see you in the next one. Peace, guys.